Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 156 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter and YouTube at Shane Haff NFL. And I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _. Mark, we're through the draft. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well. I think our draft stream this time was the best we've ever done over on the EOP stream with Shane, Dibes, Ryan, David, and I, Al popping in from the back. I thought it was awesome. It was a blast and going back and kind of like parsing through it and being like, there's certain things that happen when you're streaming and you're stacking your best available. I was hosting for a portion of it. There's things that happen where I was like, wait, I was on a stream while that happened. I have no recollection of that player getting drafted there. The draft is a whirlwind, so we're past it. It officially feels like the off season now.
Yes, and before we get into the off season, we want to bask in that afterglow of the draft and go through and do some draft grades. So we're going to start with the NFC this week. Next week we'll be back and we will do AFC draft grades. And as we said last year, this isn't your typical draft stream. This isn't the ringer where the lowest grades are like a C. Like Fs will be given if they're deserved, and we're going to try to just tell you our raw thoughts on the draft. We've got some talking points for each team. We're going to talk best value, worst value, biggest draft regret, and give an overall grade for each team. So
the funny thing I'll say is I feel like usually in general, I think I'm a harsher grader than Shane. Generally year to year, but I'm much harsher this year on the middle teams, I think, than Shane is, and Shane's much harsher on what he would deem the worst drafts. Whereas I didn't give out any Fs this year, spoiler alert, but we'll see if Shane did.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I did. Spoiler alert, but we'll get there.
I think you guys know if you follow Shane on Twitter.
Yeah, we've got a comment coming in on YouTube here. Been waiting on this. Also says I might get fired for watching this. Don't get fired for watching it. Just Alt Tab, man. You can switch tabs in a blink. It's great. So, or you can always check it out later. It'll be on podcasting platforms later today. Obviously archived on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. But let's dive in. We're going to start off with the NFC East. And we're going to start with the Philadelphia Eagles draft. And so the Eagles in the first round selected cornerback Quinyon Mitchell. In the second round at pick 40, they got Cooper DeJean. At 94, they got edge rusher Jalix Hunt. And then on day 3, they rounded out their draft with running back Will Shipley, wide receiver Anias Smith, linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr., guard Trevor Keegan, wide receiver Johnny Wilson, and center Dylan McMahon. Mark, as you look at the Eagles draft, what sticks out to you as their best value pick in the draft?
Yeah, and so people know we do the same thing with every team. When we run down on these, we go best value, we go worst value, we go the biggest regret that maybe a team has from the draft. We talk about how many top 100 picks they had, how many top 100 players we had for them in our rankings, then we give a grade. So with the Eagles, I think for me, it's hard. So I think you could go through the best value and pick who you just have the widest disparity between where you had them ranked and where they went. And if you do that, it's Jeremiah Trotter going 155 when I had him, I think, 45th on my big board. That's obviously a massive gap. But I'll make the argument. And by the way, same with Johnny Wilson, who I had at 62, goes, I'm blind, so I can't see, but 185, 186, something like that. But I would still make the argument that I think getting the guy who I had ranked 12th at pick number 40 is the best value that they got on the entire board. So initially, I think my answer would have been Trot to this question. I'm going to go Cooper DeJean though.
Yeah, if I've got to pick a player, I would say Cooper DeJean, a guy that I was totally comfortable with the Eagles taking at 22. I had him at 18 overall. He falls into the second round. But I think you could also make an argument for the fact that the Eagles entered the draft with 8 draft selections. They drafted 9 players, 2 of whom were top 21 on the consensus big board. And they also added a 3, 4, and 5 next year. And so I think you could also make the argument the best value wasn't even necessarily a player. It was the value accumulated in the way that Howie Roseman moved up and down the board, made a record 8 draft day trades, and was able to net nice future capital out of that without sacrificing this year's draft class.
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled with everything here. And, just to give it away, they had 3 top 100 picks. I had 5 top 100 players here on my big board. And Will Shipley's cheating. I had him like barely in the top 100. As for the other 4, obviously Mitchell and DeJean, I had Trotter, and then I had Johnny Wilson. Trotter and Johnny Wilson were 2 my guys. When we do our my guys pods, so they got 2 of them. And Cooper DeJean was one who very well could have been, with me having him 12. Shane and Dives, I think, had him more in the mid-teens. But DeJean is a guy that I have been extremely bullish on throughout the entire process. Me and Dives have argued whether or not he can be an outside cornerback. It'll be really interesting kind of to see where he slots in. It might make more sense this year if you're going to go Slay and Quignon on the outside. You have Isaiah Rodgers and Avonte Maddox as potential slot corner options. I think Rodgers probably wins that job. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's not as good as he was 2 years ago. And then I think there's an argument that you have CJ GJ and Cooper DeJean start at safety with Blankenship as kind of a third safety. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I know a lot of people are talking about DeJean being a slot guy. Feels like we have a ton of options at that role. So I don't see DeJean getting a ton of snaps there, which is what worries me a little bit. If DeJean's not going to be a safety, I really hope they find snaps for him at outside corner. I hope that this isn't a pick that he gets redshirted a little bit, because now we have almost a glutton of secondary talent.
How I would approach it, because he is versatile, I think he can play all the defensive back spots.
Agreed.
The problem with trying to throw that on a rookie is the Fangio defense is already complex to begin with. And I almost feel like you need to put him in a role and leave him there. I would like to see them just use him as a safety this year. And when you're in nickel, maybe you drop Chauncey Gardner-Johnson down into the slot. And then when you're in base, DeJean comes off the field, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's a safety. And then, a year down the road, Slay's a year older, maybe you try DeJean out at outside cornerback then if you need a Darius Slay replacement, because I still would like to see him long-term at cornerback, but I think his simplest path onto the field this year is at safety.
So you don't think there's any chance you could play DeJean and CJ GJ out there together at safety? Is that just not, you just don't have enough there?
You could. That's something I hadn't thought about as much, but it'd be interesting to see if they go with that approach.
I know, because they would theoretically kind of operate similarly in that role, you'd imagine, but I think in some packages you could definitely throw them out there depending on kind of what team you're going against. But yeah, and that's what kind of like I think Blankenship is better suited for kind of a reserve role where you're coming in on certain packages that you're needed. So yeah, I do think that that's probably the best way to get DeJean on the field, and I think Quignon's going to start day one. Based on everything that they're saying about him and playing next to Slay. So I mean, you couldn't be happier about the remade secondary. It seems like we might have 4 new starters at the 5 slots, potentially at least. Like that, there's a chance for that Slay is the only starter from last year's team in the secondary that starts again. There's a chance there.
Yeah. Well, enough being positive. Let's be negative now. What was the worst value that the Eagles had? I think we probably both have the same guy. I'll mention it. Edge rusher Jalix Hunt. He was number 142 on the consensus big board, which I'm using because he was not on either of our top 100s, and he was drafted at 94. To me, that's the worst value. He seems like a guy that was pretty significantly overdrafted, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems like a project. Apparently, Fangio really likes him, and I mean, you can't accuse the Eagles of not having a type. I mean, they love Deshaun Reddick. They signed Bryce Huff this year. They love Nolan Smith. They want these, what they deem as kind of freakish athletes at edge, who maybe they're a little bit smaller than your traditional edge rushers, but they think they can kind of get a lot out of the speed. He's a converted DB. It's not the pick I would have made whatsoever. But hard for me to be too critical when they got 2 guys later on in the draft who I would have considered at that spot, with Johnny Wilson, and more so obviously with Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who I'll just say, I'll kind of throw this out there. I was much higher than Shane and Dives on Trotter Jr., and I was kind of worried about the Nakobe Dean comparisons, obviously, but decided to ignore it. And I think that you can kind of use him in a lot of interesting ways. Obviously, with blitzing, he graded out really well last year in terms of blitzing, in terms of run coverage, and in terms of pass coverage. So you just hope that that kind of translates to the next level, despite the size. I think it's obviously worth a shot where they took it on him. And I'm a believer in the bloodline guys, to be honest. And it feels like over the last couple of years, we've seen so many of these guys pan out, like Joey Porter Jr. and so many others that it comes out maybe even after the fact that aren't as well-known players that they're sons of. But I do think you do get a little bit of what it takes. You grew up in that. You have a dad who kind of coached you up probably to know what's important at that position. So I do love taking a chance on those guys. And obviously with him being an Eagles legend, the Laurie call with Howie and Laurie and Sirianni and all them, that's one of my favorite draft call videos of all time. And by the way, just real quick, I'm such a nerd for all those videos, the absolute best.
All right. So then when we come to the biggest draft regret for the Eagles, for me, that was not being able to land a wide receiver or an offensive lineman that would make an impact. You came in, you think maybe you could go right guard, maybe you could go tackle that could play guard, wide receiver 3. And that's just the biggest. It's not a miss. I mean, maybe I would have taken somebody else over Jalix Hunt. I would have taken both the cornerbacks. But if you look back, there's a little bit of regret that you just didn't land an impact player at either position for me.
Yeah, the receiver thing, I think at least they threw 2 darts. And I think when you have AJ Brown and Devontae and Dallas Goedert, I'm willing to let them. I've complained in the past about not enough kind of attention paid to wide receiver 3. I think Devontae Parker getting snaps would be a catastrophe. I honestly think Paris Campbell would be fine. I think Paris Campbell would be better than Quez or Devontae Parker would be by a lot. Obviously, Quez is gone, but Johnny Wilson is at least an interesting project. Maybe you can do something interesting with him. It seems like Sirianni was really excited about Johnny Wilson. Then Aniyah Smith is like a slot receiver prospect. I wasn't too into him in terms of when I watched the tape, but at least they took 2 darts there. Trevor Keegan obviously played on Michigan, so there's some experience there on a high level offensive line. I wasn't as high on him either, but they threw darts there, and they're not going to be able to cover every position. But I guess that's where you can say maybe they could have taken a receiver or an interior offensive lineman where they took Jalix Hunt.
All right. So the Eagles had 3 top 100 picks. They took 3 top 100 players on my board. I gave the Eagles an A+ for this draft class. What did you give them?
I gave him an A. I probably should have given an A+ considering that I had 5 top 100 players with 3 top 100 picks, but the Jalix Hunt pick took it down just a notch. So I still gave him my top grade in the NFC. Don't have any A+. I gave them an A.
All right, let's keep the ball rolling here, and let's go to the Dallas Cowboys, who selected Tyler Guyton in the first round. On day 2, took Marshawn Nealon, Cooper Beebe, and Maurice Liufu. I don't know if I said that right. How do you say that? He's a Notre Dame guy.
I think it's Maris Liufau. I've heard it said different ways though.
Okay, and then on day 3, Kalen Carson, Ryan Flournoy, Nathan Thomas, and Justin Rogers. And so we look at their draft class. For me, I said the best value for them. I could go one of 2 ways. Cooper Beebe, he was 37 on my board. He's 73 overall in the draft. So that's a great value. I also think it was nice for them that Tyler Guyton is the guy that they probably wanted all along, and they still got him after moving down to collect an extra 3rd-round pick. So I really liked both of those moves for the Cowboys. What was your best value for them?
Yeah, I love the Cooper Beebe pick. Besides that, not to skip too far ahead, but the Dallas draft to me is just such a C. Like I guess you could argue with Cooper Beebe, maybe I should have made it like a C+ or a B- because I do think that's a great value. Besides that, it's like Tyler Guyton's 29, like I had him in the early 30s. Marshawn Nealon's 56, like I had him in the 60s. Liufau is 87. I had him like just missing my top 100. Kalen Carson was a guy like I had eyes on day 3, but not a guy I was super into. Like, just I didn't have any bad value really. because I didn't have a problem with any of the picks, but none of the picks get me going either. Besides BB, and I wasn't even as high on him as you guys were. I think I had him in the 50s, mid 50s, where he got drafted at 73. So it's not like I think that's some steal or anything. Just unexciting in terms of a draft to me. Hopefully, if you're the Cowboys, you got 2 starters on the offensive line, and that's not unexciting, obviously. But just a big time meh. And you didn't get my regret is you didn't get a wide receiver too. I feel like Dallas for years has been lacking a wide receiver to pair with CeeDee Lamb. I don't know why. I mean, they thought they fixed it with Brandon Cooks. I didn't think that Brandon Cooks looked like a spry chicken last year, especially towards the end of the year. They lost Michael Gallup, who just signed elsewhere. I just don't love what they have at weapons besides CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I put my biggest regret was that Jerry Jones couldn't keep his mouth shut about how much they like Jonathan Brooks.
But that would have been a bad pick. Where I didn't even like the pick.
Yeah, to be honest, spoiler alert for when we get to the Panthers. The Panthers probably saved the Cowboys from themselves a bit with that trade up. Yeah. But this isn't an exciting draft, and it's for a team that's in a win now mode because Dak's on the last year of his deal, and he has a no tag, no trade clause. So you're just kind of stuck. And you got a guy I like in Tyler Guyton that's a bit of a project, and your only starter right now is Cooper Beebe, I feel like. And so it's not the most impressive draft. They had 4 top 100 picks. They took 3 top 100 players for me. I gave it a B-. I said it's like a meat and potatoes draft, but it's not exciting.
Yeah, B- isn't crazy because I do like the BB pick. Maybe I should have went C+, but I went straight just C.
All right. Well, let's get into the next team in the NFC East. Let's go to the New York Football Giants, as we made the joke over and over on our podcast or on our draft show. And the Giants, they took Malik Neighbors in the first round, Tyler Nubin in the second round, Andrew Phillips in the third round. And then in day 3, they took Theo Johnson, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and Darius Masau. What was your best value for the Giants in this draft?
By the way, I will say, I think that I never thought about this in my life. I think the New York, and I should have said this on the stream, the New York Football Giants thing, I'm pretty sure is a thing because the New York Giants were a baseball team until like the late 50s, early 60s. I don't know when the New York Giants, there was definitely some overlap for sure between the football team being the New York Giants and the baseball team being there. That's why the New York Football Giants, I'm pretty sure. I'm not, that's not like a history lesson. I'm just assuming and thinking on the top of my head. But my favorite draft pick here for the Giants was Tyler Nubin. Tyler Nubin's a guy who I was extremely high on. Could have been my guy. I had him all the way up at, I think, 22, something in that range. So I had him as a first-round prospect comfortably for me as a first-round grade. And they obviously got him in the middle of the second round, replaced a desperate need. They should have never let Xavier McKinney go. But they did, so they had to replace him, and I think Tyler Nubin is as good as a replacement as they could have possibly had in the draft because I think he's by far the best safety in this draft if you don't count Cooper DeJean, who I want to play safety.
Yeah, I'm with you. Tyler Nubin was my best value, 38 on the consensus big board. I was higher. He was drafted at 47 overall, so I loved that pick. However, I didn't love their third-round pick in Andrew Phillips. I listed him as the worst value. He was 93 on the consensus big board, and he was picked at 70, and that just felt like a bit of a reach.
Yeah, totally there, right there with you. There's some late buzz on Phillips that he might go in like the high second, late first even. So I guess when you talk about it that way, getting him at 70 is not that crazy, but didn't make my top 100. So obviously, yeah.
All right, so then let's get to the biggest regret. And for me, it's not taking a quarterback. Now, they must not have liked J.J. McCarthy because he was there. We didn't get a world where the Minnesota Vikings traded up. The Giants had the chance to take McCarthy if they wanted him, and they must not have wanted him. And that's fine if that's how your evaluation of him went. I obviously didn't have him that high either, but there's no denying that you walk out of this draft class and you didn't walk away with a quarterback. And so you enter this season with Daniel Jones, a guy that you can't wait to get rid of. That's got to be a big regret for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. But like you said, I don't think that there would have been any value in taking Penix or McCarthy or Nix at 6, obviously. as we kind of criticized all three of those picks after the fact. Actually, we'll talk about Minnesota when we get to Minnesota. You were less critical of McCarthy than I was just because of the process that it took to get there, kind of. But the Giants, yeah, I obviously I think they should have done something. There's a couple teams that I think like, man, I would have mortgaged the future and just forced New England to say no. And then if New England didn't say no, just leak how much New England said no to after the fact. They should have offered like their next 2 firsts with the 2 firsts this year, because I think Drake May would have been that important for New England for the New York Giants to go and grab, or same with Minnesota, same with Denver, Vegas. There's a lot of teams that I think you could say the same about there. I would have really mortgaged the future to go up and get Drake May. Maybe that's why I wouldn't be a good GM. But the Giants, I'm not as high on Neighbors as the general consensus. I don't have my RAS charts, cooked up and ready to display on the screen, but I tweeted this one out. Malik Neighbors, to me, there's been some out there comparisons when you talk about Malik Neighbors, and obviously LSU names come up like Odell, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. I think that's kind of lazy to me. He's much more like Chris Olave. I think he's going to be a really good receiver. I mean, Chris Olave is arguably top 15, top 20 receiver. I just don't see the top 5 upside for Malik Neighbors in the way that I do for MHJ or Odunze. So above the quarterback aspect, I'd say not getting I'd say taking Neighbors over Odunze, or maybe even Bowers, would be my regret here. And that's what drove my Giants grade down to a C.
All right. I have the Giants. I gave them a B+. They had 3 top 100 picks. They took 2 of my top 100 players. I would have preferred Odunze to Neighbors, but I understood why they took Neighbors. I really liked the Tyler Nubin pick there, and I think that helped push theirs up a little bit for me. So,
real quick,
yes,
I'll just say it seems like the Giants, and at least Joe Shane in the Joe Shane era, very much have a type when it comes to wide receiver. Wan'Dale Robinson was a high pick. Jalen Hyatt was a high pick. Kadarius Toney was a high pick. Now you have Malik Neighbors, kind of a lot of the same guy in that wide receiver room. Obviously, Neighbors more talented than any of them, but I think Odunze would have just made a lot more sense, much bigger. Like I just think, I don't know. That's my take there.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the Washington Commanders, who made a lot of selections in this draft. They took Jaden Daniels in the first round, Jerzan Newton and Mike Sanderstill, and Ben Sinnott all in the second round. Brandon Coleman and Luke McCaffrey in the third round. And then in day 3, they rounded it out with Jordan Maggie, Dominique Hampton, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste. So we look at their draft class. They obviously made a lot of picks. For me, their best value was Jerzan Newton, guy that was 19 on the consensus big board. He fell into the second round. He was my DT1, ends up going off the board at 36 overall. I think that was a slam dunk pick for them, but I'm going to tie it in with my biggest regret here. And that's that it was a top defensive tackle that fell instead of an offensive tackle, because the Commanders, it's a great value pick. They've got 2 really good defensive tackles. It would have been so much better for them. I'm not saying they shouldn't have taken him, but it would have been really nice for them if one of those top offensive tackles had fallen instead. It would have been a lot bigger need.
Yeah, totally agree with everything you said there. I'm not even going to add too much to it. Newton also my best value. My biggest regret, the biggest one, Jaden Daniels over Drake May. I think they messed that up. I think these guys are going to be intertwined for a long time. Daniels might look better right away. He's in a better situation than May. He's more athletic, which I think gives you a higher floor right away. I just think long term, they're going to rue the day that they passed on Drake May. I did not mean to rhyme there.
That was perfect.
I really, you put that on a quote card, but I really do think that they're going to regret taking Daniels over May.
All right. So was that your worst value, taking Jaden Daniels?
No, I put Brandon Coleman early third. Didn't have him in my top 100. Don't have much to say on it, but the bigger regret for me is taking Daniels over May.
I put my worst value was taking Luke McCaffrey at 100 overall.
He's Christian's brother. You got to.
I know, but he was 155 on the consensus big board, so it's not the hugest reach. But Troy Franklin was right there. That's the Troy Franklin pick. It would have been a lot better pick. So overall, they had 6 top 100 picks. They took 4 of my top 100 players. I graded them a B-. It would have been higher if they took May, because I really like the Newton pick. I really like Sandra Still. I really like Sinnott. I liked the round 2, just not a fan of their round 1 and 3.
Yeah, I'm being too harsh because I think that the first pick matters so much more than the rest, but I went with a C because of Daniels over May.
All right, so let's go to the Detroit Lions now. We're pivoting to the NFC North. The Detroit Lions, let me pop it up on the screen here, didn't make as many selections as some other teams did, but they made some impactful ones. Terrion Arnold at pick 24 in the first round. They doubled up on corner with Ennis Rakestraw Jr. at the end of the second. And then on day 3, they drafted Giovanni Manu, Sion Vaki, Makai Wingo, and Christian Mahogany. I have my best value in this draft for them being Terrion Arnold. He was 13 on the consensus big board, falls to 24. A lot of people had him CB1. I thought that was a great pick for them. And then also, I mean, Christian Mahogany at pick 210. That guy was inside my top 100. I love that one, but Terrion Arnold had to take the best value pick for me.
Yeah, I had Terrion Arnold as CB1. I had him as defensive player 1 in the entire draft class. I had him number 7 overall. I think you could make an argument it was the best value in the entire draft. And I liked before the 22nd pick, when the Eagles took Quignon, I told you guys, I don't care. Get me any of the corners. Get me Arnold, get me DeJean, get me Mitchell, get me Wiggins. I don't care. I'm not going to be picky. And they took my CB4, and I was happy. They took Mitchell. They ended up getting my CB2 the next day, so it made it feel even better. But I can't lie. There was a small part of me that was a little sad to see Arnold go off the board 2 picks later after we took Mitchell. I do think Arnold's the better prospect, the more battle-tested prospect. But not to take anything away from Mitchell, I'm still really happy, obviously, with what the Eagles did. They got my CB2 and CB4. But Terrion Arnold, my favorite value in the entire draft, potentially.
All right. And what was your least favorite value for them?
It goes with the regret, trading a future pick to go up and get Giovanni Manu from British Columbia. I just think it's such a sight unseen kind of Dan Campbell type of pick. It kind of goes hand in hand with my biggest regret.
Yeah, I thought Brad Holmes was, he was strutting his stuff in the lead up to the draft, and he nailed round 1. And then he totally went rogue on day 2. He massively reached for Manu, 398 on the consensus big board, took him at 126. He massively reached for Vaki. So they had 2 top 100 picks. They nailed those 2. And then I thought the wheels really came off their draft. But overall, I gave them a B- because it's largely on the strength of those first 2 picks.
Yeah, it's hard to be too critical of Detroit for the second round pick because they did the same thing as we did. I'm not nearly as high on Rakestraw as I am Arnold or DeJean or Mitchell comparatively. So I think they got Rakestraw like around where Rakestraw should have been drafted. And I think there's an argument they had such a needed edge rusher that they didn't fill. And maybe they could have went with a Braswell or a Trice instead of a Rakestraw there in the second round, but still got a really solid player. I gave him a B+. If Rakestraw was an edge rusher, like one of those guys, could have been an A+ for me.
All right, let's go to the Green Bay Packers, who were in an interesting position coming into this draft. You just made the playoffs. You went to the divisional round. You have one of the youngest teams in the NFL. How do you approach the draft? And they made a lot of selections. And so they had Jordan Morgan in the first round. In the second round, Edgerrin Cooper and Javon Bullard, Marshawn Lloyd and Tyron Hopper in the third round. And then on day 3, Evan Williams, Jacob Monk, Ketan Oladipo, Travis Glover, and Michael Pratt. My best value I put on here was linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, that they got him at 45 overall. That's still kind of about where I had him. So it's not like it's a great value, but that's what I had as their best value.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like their top 3 guys, I think like Morgan, Cooper, and Bullard are all like right where I have them about in terms of where they got drafted. But they're all at positions of need. Their biggest need going in was the tackle. They got that. And they kind of need interior O-line as well. Morgan could potentially shift inside. So I went with Jordan Morgan as my favorite pick of theirs. You know how much I like Jordan Morgan. So they got him right where I had him ranked pretty much. But I think for Green Bay, he was a perfect pick for them. My biggest regret and worst value go hand in hand. It's Marshawn Lloyd. I'm not high on any of the running backs in this class, but Marshawn Lloyd especially. You just paid Josh Jacobs all that money, and you go out and spend a 3rd-round pick when you could have went out and got a receiver instead. There were still a lot of receivers on the board. Troy Franklin was on the board. I think he would have fit perfectly with Christian Watson and some of the other guys who developed last year. I'm forgetting the one name of their one receiver who really took
Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, Romeo Doubs. There was even another guy. I think maybe Dontavion Wicks. I might be saying the wrong name, but there was even another guy who really took a step down the stretch. So I know they have a couple of guys, but I think Troy Franklin would have slotted in really nicely.
Are you talking about Jaden Reed?
Jaden Reed, that's who it was, not Dontavion Wicks. Yeah, Jaden Reed really took a step down the stretch. I know he was big in fantasy circles towards the end of the year when Love really went on a run, but I would have liked to see them take another receiver instead of Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah, my worst value for them was linebacker Tyron Hopper. He was 182 on the consensus big board. They took him at 91, and he was the second linebacker they took in this draft. I just didn't think it was necessary. My biggest regret was for them trading up for Javon Bullard and then taking another safety in the 4th round and another safety in the 5th round, all after they paid Xavier McKinney big money. That didn't make sense to me. For your big signing to be a safety and then to trade up for a safety and draft 3 total safeties. That just seemed like overkill, but
they might think Bullard's a nickel corner or a slot corner.
Yeah, they might. Overall, they had 5 top 100 picks. They took 3 top 100 players for me. I gave them a C-. What was your grade on them?
Yeah, I gave them a C. They drafted guys exactly where I thought they should be drafted at positions they needed. So it's hard to be too critical. Not a lot of values, not a lot of crazy bad picks either, though. 5 top 100 picks. I only had 3 top 100 players. So I gave a C.
Okay, let's keep going here in the NFC North. Let's talk Minnesota Vikings. Actually, let me read their picks. I was about to say the best value. So they took J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner in the 1st round and did not pick again until day 3 when they took Kyrie Jackson, Walter Rouse, Will Reichard, Michael Juergens, and Levi Drake Rodriguez. My best value for them in the draft was Dallas Turner, who was number 8 on consensus big boards, and they drafted him at 17. But before I give you or ask you your best value, I'm going to tell you my worst value for them as well. And that's Dallas Turner, because Dallas Turner cost them 6 total picks. They traded 42 and 188 and a second next year for pick 23. And then they traded pick 23, a 5th, and a future 3rd and 4th to move up for Turner. So if you're tracking at home, they traded pick 42, pick 188, a 5th rounder, and then a future 2, 3, 4. Is what it cost them to draft Dallas Turner. And so although he's a good pick at 17, he's a good value, getting to 17 was horrendous value for the Vikings. So I think per Seth Walder, it's the 2nd largest overpay for a non-QB in since he's been tracking it over like the last decade.
Was first Will Anderson probably?
Yeah, first was Will Anderson, which obviously worked out. And so you hope this works out if you're the Vikings, but that one's tough.
Where did Kyrie Jackson go here on this board? Pick 108.
Pick 108.
You know how much I loved Kyrie Jackson. I had him like 38 on my board. That's one of my favorite draft picks of the entire draft. So Kyrie Jackson, my favorite draft pick on the board. My worst value is J.J. McCarthy. I'm just not a big but going into a perfect situation, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison at receiver, TJ Hawkinson at tight end, Kevin O'Connell, really good offensive coach. If JJ McCarthy doesn't work out in Minnesota, then he really stinks. So I'll give it a C.
All right. I gave them.
We've given 7 grades out, and I've given 5 C's out, exact C's.
A lot of average here. A lot of average. Yeah. I said my biggest regret for the Vikings was not realizing they could stand and draft McCarthy before they traded for 23, which is obviously where a lot of that lost value comes in. They traded for that pick fully expecting to leverage 10 and 23 and turn it into McCarthy. And then McCarthy just fell because of some baffling things we'll talk about in a minute. So that improper read on the board really hurt them for me. But they had 2 top 100 picks. They got 3 top 100 players for me. So I gave them a C+. And hopefully Vikings fans enjoy that, because next year they have a 1st-round pick and 2 5th-round picks, and that's it. So they won't have very exciting mock drafts next year.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, let's move on to the Chicago Bears, who Had a fun draft. If you're a Bears fan, they get Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze in the first round. In the third round, Kyron Amagaji, offensive tackle out of Yale. And then on day 3, they got Torrey Taylor and Austin Booker. I put that their best value was Austin Booker. He was 73 on the consensus big board. They got him at 144. He sort of fits a need. I really liked that pick from them just to fill out depth on their defensive line. What was your best value for the Bears?
Yeah, I also went Austin Booker. I think you could have argued for Rome Odunze, who I had number 4 overall, going 9. I think that's incredible value. I've kind of changed my mind on that pick the farther we've gotten away from it. At the time I was kind of arguing they really needed an edge rusher and could have gotten Latu, Turner, or Verse. I still listed that as the biggest regret, not walking away with Latu, Turner, or Verse. I still think now pass rush is just a huge problem for the Bears going into the year. You hope Austin Booker can step up. I had him pretty high in my big board, so I do like Booker. Love the value in the 5th round. But Odunze, I've come around on it. He's just such a great prospect. Apparently, the Titans almost had him written down on the pick card and then changed their mind and went with Latham, apparently. So maybe Odunze shouldn't even have been there. I don't think he should have been. You could argue that. You could also argue Caleb at 1 because most years you're not getting Caleb Williams with the first pick. I think it was a special year to have the first pick for Chicago. So, yeah, I mean, just absolutely love this draft from Chicago.
Yeah, my worst value, yours is probably the same, is punter Torrey Taylor. He consensus big board 206. You drafted him at 122 in a draft where you only had 5 picks. And to tie that in, my biggest regret is probably that you drafted a player that your franchise quarterback immediately texted and said, "Hey, we don't need you. You're not going to be punting much." So did not like that pick. However, I gave them an A+. They had 3 top 100 picks. They got 4 top 100 players for me. I loved everything they did except for the Taylor pick.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It's just not enough picks to take a punter, so I couldn't get an A+, but I did give out an A. Just not enough. Only 5 picks, so I would have liked to see them use the 4th round pick. There are still a lot of good players on the board, but I'm still giving them an A.
Okay, let's get into the NFC South now, and we'll start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who selected Graham Barton in the first round, Chris Broswell in the second round. In the third round, they got Tyke Smith and Jalen McMillan. And then on day 3, they got Bucky Irving, Elijah Klein, and Devin Culp. I had the best value for them as Graham Barton. He was 23 on the consensus big board, 20 on my big board, and they got him at 26. It's not a sexy pick, but he's a good interior offensive lineman. It fits the need for them. I liked the Barton pick for the Buccaneers.
I like the Braswell pick. I love Chris Braswell in terms of where they got him in the draft. I didn't have a worst value. It feels like Bucky Irving was a guy I had in my top 100. Jalen McMillan had him right before that. I don't have a worst value. I will say my regret, and I just like Jackson Powers Johnson a lot. I think they should have taken JPJ over Barton, but Barton, not a bad pick where they got him.
Yeah, I had my worst value as Tyke Smith, and it's nitpicking a bit. He was like 130 on the consensus big board. They took him at 89. That's not a huge reach near the end of the third round if you like the player, but statistically speaking, that was the worst value for me. My biggest regret for them was just they weren't able to do anything exciting. This is a meat and potatoes draft. 4 top 100 picks, 4 top 100 players. I think Barton and Broswell plug in right away, but just nothing like exciting. And part of that is because you accidentally messed around and won your division last year, and you end up at the bottom of the first round, and then you accidentally won a playoff game too, which sounds ridiculous to say, but it's just that team never had a shot to actually go contend for a Super Bowl. And in my opinion, they still don't. And they're a ways from that. And so it's not an exciting draft, but building through the trenches is the right approach. So I gave him a C+.
I think they very much have the 3rd best roster in that division. Looking at Atlanta, looking at New Orleans, and looking at them, I think they have the 3rd roster. I think they're going to take a big step back this year.
Yeah.
B-, by the way.
B-. Okay, let's go to the New Orleans Saints, who selected Talisi Fuaga in the first round. In the second round, they took Kool-Aid McKinstry, and then they did not pick again until day 3 when they took Spencer Rattler, Bub Means, Jalen Ford, Christian Boyd, and Josiah Ezram. And so as I look at their draft, I say the best value was Spencer Rattler. He was 90 on the consensus big board. He was QB7, and he came off the board 132 picks after QB6 at 150 overall. And so that's a really good value. There's a lot of teams that should have taken Spencer Rattler on day 2. There's probably only like 3 teams in the NFL that should not have taken Spencer Rattler on day 2. And that's not because I'm a huge Spencer Rattler guy, but he's a toolsy guy that you should want as a backup, especially when you see backup contracts. So that was my best value for the Saints. Which way did you go here?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said about the Rattler pick. I went with Kool-Aid McKinstry as the best value. He's a guy I had, I think, 20th. I had him as a first-round prospect. So moving up to get him at 41, I do like being aggressive to move up and get McKinstry. Love what they did in the first round with Flagga. They needed an offensive tackle. Everyone knew it. I think they got by far the best one available at that time at 14. Didn't have to move up to do it. I think he fits what they do perfectly. I don't even have a bad value here. I guess you could say Bub Means. I don't know who that is, to be quite honest. And he went in the 5th round. So, but it's a 5th round pick. Do I really care about it? My only regret is not getting a day 2 receiver. It does feel like they're lacking at receiver outside of Olave. But like, I wouldn't have changed anything. Like, I would have taken Flagga. I would have taken McKinstry. So it's hard to say it's too much of a regret. It's more just about the team building before the draft that you didn't have another receiver there. But yeah, I love this draft. I actually gave it a B+. I thought about giving it an A-.
Yeah, they took an offensive tackle with the first round pick they've had since they traded the first round pick to go get Trevor Penning, who they're now replacing. So they probably regret that.
Yeah.
I put my biggest regret is Derek Carr's contract, which they restructured this offseason, especially when Spencer Rattler's probably going to be starting for them by the late season, because he's just the anti-Derek Carr, and I think they're going to fade from the playoffs, and Spencer Rattler's going to end. Everybody in New Orleans hates Derek Carr, so I could see that happening as the season rolls along. But overall, they had 2 top 100 picks. They took 3 top 100 players for me. I gave them a B-, which sounds a little harsh considering what I just laid out. It's just hard with not having day 3 and day 4 picks. Round 3, round 4 picks. Only 2 picks in the top 140. It's going to be hard for me to get you much higher than that, but I do like what they did overall.
Yeah, I actually think there's a chance that they're being undersold a little bit this year. I mean, they went 9-8 last year, and I think they're better than they were. So I think they're going to be like a 9-10 win team again, just like a boring competing for the wild card team. They'll probably just miss out. Like, I feel like they're just kind of what they are.
Do you remember when I called Derek Carr West Coast Kirk Cousins, and we thought that was an insult to Derek Carr?
Oh, that would have been, he would have loved that. He would love that now. I guess he's being paid like Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, now it's an insult to Kirk Cousins, but
yeah.
Okay, let's keep going here. Let's get into the Atlanta Falcons draft. One of my favorite draft classes to talk about. They took Michael Penix Jr. at 8 overall, and on day 2, they took Rook Orohiro and Braylon Trice. And then day 3, Brandon Dorlus, JT Bertrand, Jace McClellan, Casey Washington, and Zion Logue. I'm not sure if that's how you say that, but defensive tackle out of Georgia. I had my best value being Braylon Trice. He was number 44 on my board. He went 74 overall, which is still below where the consensus big board was at 68. I loved the Trice pick there for the Falcons.
Yeah, I had Braylon Trice like 35. You tweeted out my quote during the draft when they took him at 74. Braylon Trice is the best player that the Falcons got from the University of Washington in this draft, and that includes pick they made at number 8 with Michael Penix. And I'll just get it started right there. I mean, that's the worst pick. That's the regret. I tried to almost talk myself into the philosophy of it. If this was Drake May sliding from 3 and he just somehow didn't go off the board, JJ went 3 and then no one moved up for a quarterback. Let's say Drake May was there at 8. If they took Drake May, what would your reaction be, Shane?
I would like it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I could talk myself into it. I'd be like, hey, they didn't know that the NFL would go crazy and Drake May wouldn't be there, or Drake May would be there at 8 when they signed Cousins. You can get out of the Cousins deal after 2 years, and then you can go with Drake May if that's what you want to do. So I would like it if that's the case. The thing that's getting lost, I think so much of this conversation is just how much, asset accumulation you can use on a single position. And can you spend 180 million, which is actually like 90 million guaranteed over only 2 years, by the way. I will throw that out there as one thing. It's only guaranteed for 2 years. They can get out of it after that. And the 8th pick, it's less about that. To me, Michael Penix is a scary prospect to invest in, especially in a controversial manner like this. He's a guy who just had tremendous, severe knee issues throughout his college career. He tested out really well. Have you ever watched Michael Penix tape and been like, wow, what an athlete?
No,
not once have I done that. To me, like, I had Penix in the 50s in my rankings. They took him 8th. To me, it's more about the prospect than it is about the process, is what I'll say. Like, it's less. If this was a quarterback prospect that I liked, I would be defending it, because I think quarterback's that important. And I know Kirk Cousins is a guy that I like. I would have made the same move as Atlanta did to go out and sign him. I think Atlanta has a lot of talent on that field. But I do understand when you bring in the fact that Michael Penix shouldn't have went 8, even if you were desperate for a quarterback.
Here's the thing. You mentioned Drake May. If Drake May fell, Drake May being there at 8 would have been totally inconceivable.
Yes.
And so you do it. Here's the thing. 46 days before the draft, they signed Kirk Cousins to this contract. You're telling me 46 days ago, they didn't know they liked Michael Penix yet? Or they thought he was going to go ahead of them? Like, there was zero chance Michael Penix was not going to be there at 8. If that's your guy, don't sign Kirk Cousins, draft him at 8. Maybe that I wouldn't like it, but you could justify that. You can justify the Michael Penix pick. You can justify the Kirk Cousins signing. You cannot justify both, especially when you look at Penix, who we now know he played with 3 top 100 receivers and a pair of top 100 tackles.
Yep.
Like, he's such a difficult evaluation. He's an old, injury-prone prospect. It's just an indictment on Terry Fontenot, who's had 4 top 10 picks in the last 4 years, and he's spent 3 of them on a tight end, a running back, and a 24-year-old backup quarterback. It's egregious, and Atlanta has to get him out of the building. This was an F grade for me, and they had 3 top 100 picks, and they took 4 of my top 100 players, and it's still an F. This is atrocious.
That's why I gave it a D. I love the Trice pick so much. I think the Falcons have said such a desperate need for an edge rusher. It's why everyone thought they were taking Dallas Turner at 8th. I still think no matter what, the Falcons should have moved back. There's no argument against the Falcons moving back. If they move back to mid to late teens, you can still get one of Latu, Turner, reverse, or maybe Penix is still there. And if they would have moved back and then taken Penix, the reaction again is different than sticking at 8 and taking him. It's just,
my fear was that they would stick at 8 and take Dallas Turner, and I thought they should have traded back. But to take Michael Penix Jr. at 8, just, man.
Yeah, you weren't as high on Turner as I was. I think I had Turner like 10 or 11. So taking him at 8 for me, and that was your.
I mean, I had him 13. I just had those guys clustered. I thought there was a lot of value to be had moving back for all these offense-heavy teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to defend. I feel like I defended it on my radio show on Saturday because the 2 people that I was on with were killing it so much strictly from assets spent at the position. I think Shane and I have been remarkably consistent on this show and on the draft streams. Shane and I value quarterback more than anybody. If you don't have a quarterback, you should be doing whatever you can to figure out what your plan for the future is at quarterback, no matter where you're at in your rebuilding process or what you think you have on your roster. But you can't just pick a guy because you like him and ignore the league-wide value that he has, ignore where he's probably going to go if you don't take him. And I don't know where the landing spot was for Penix if you don't take him. Was it 13 with the Raiders? And then you lose out because you traded back behind them. If that's the case, Terry Fontenot, you're dealing with a lot less heat than you are right now. If you would have moved back.
And you're pushing great defensive players down the board to you too.
Exactly. It's just, I defended it on Saturday. It's hard to defend now, but man, I do love Braylon Trice. I do think Braylon Trice turns into, the more and more I watched him, the more and more I think he's a ready-made guy right now to step in and be a pretty good pass rusher.
Yeah. All right, well, let's keep rolling here with the Carolina Panthers.
We can go fast here. Should we just show the David Tepper hat grab off the guy's head instead of actually talking about the draft?
Oh, man, maybe so. So they traded up into the first round and took wide receiver Xavier Legette. Then they took Jonathan Brooks and Trevin Wallace on day 2. Day 3, Jatavion Sanders, Chua Smith-Wade, Jaden Crumedy, whatever, and Michael Barrett. It seems fuzzy when I'm trying to read it off my screen share screen instead of my actual screen. I don't know if it looks fuzzy to you too, but my best value for the Panthers was tight end Jatavion Sanders. He was 60 on the consensus big board, 49 for me. He went 101 overall. My worst value for them was linebacker Trevin Wallace, who I thought was overdrafted by about a round. Where did you slide in on them?
Yeah, I had Jatavion as my best value. My worst value is Jonathan Brooks. I just think taking a running back at 46 in this draft, no matter who it was, would have been a massive mistake, especially one who is coming off of a knee injury. I don't know if he's going to be, what we think he is right away in year one. I will say, overall, Carolina did a good job getting Bryce Young some guys. Like, how how much I love Xavier Legette, and him going 32 is one of those ones where it makes you feel smart, where Johnny Wilson Trot goes so late. I had them ranked so high. You're like, wait, maybe I'm not that good at this. But Legette, who I think I had a lot higher than consensus, ends up sneaking into the first round after all. So I'm happy to see Legette. He's going to be their best receiver on the roster day one, in my opinion. And Jatavion Sanders might be their second best weapon behind Legette on day one. That's how barren that roster is for talent. So I'm happy that they helped Bryce Young. My biggest regret, and it goes into what I said initially, is I had another one initially written down. My biggest regret is having someone own your franchise that is willing to get upset by a sign outside of a restaurant and what said restaurant to yell at the manager and take his Eagles hat off of his head because he's mad about a sign that says let the GM or coach draft the players. That's my biggest regret if you're the Panthers.
Yeah, my biggest regret was just trading up.
Shane didn't even justify that with he's just like, I'm gonna move by.
Yeah, I mean for Brooks, they did the right thing. They moved back from 39 to 52 for a second rounder, and that was crazy value. But then they turned around and traded 3 picks to move up and take a running back coming off an injury, and that just doesn't make any sense. They also traded up 1 spot with Buffalo from 33 to 32 to take Xavier Legette, when the Bills were obviously taking a receiver, so they wouldn't trade it to you if your guy was their guy. There was no reason to go make that move. I just thought, for the good value they got moving back 39 to 52, I thought they gave a lot of value away, especially in the Brooks trade.
I wonder, is that when Carolina's, this is a broader thing. When Carolina is negotiating with Buffalo, though, does Buffalo know that Carolina is trading up for a receiver, you think?
Yeah. I mean, you put yourself in Buffalo's GM shoes. You call me and you want to trade up and swap spots. I'm going to, well, who you taking?
Yeah, but then Carolina would be like, well, I'm not going to tell you. That gives away all our leverage.
Well, but then I'm just not going to trade it with you. The Bills aren't going to play games. They're taking a receiver. They had to know that they weren't going to take Keon Coleman from them. And sure, you could lie, but then I'm not going to pick up the phone next time you call. So I think for sure they knew.
I wonder if it's more broad. Is it I'm moving up for a receiver, they're a slot guy, or they're an out. I wonder how broad or how specific those calls get on when someone's does Chicago know that the Eagles are moving up for Jalen Carter when it was that pick? I'm very curious. I'm always curious. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep the ball rolling here and get into our final division for this episode. We'll get into the NFC West, and we'll start with the 49ers. They took Ricky Pearsall on day 1, Renardo Green and Dominique Pooney on day 2, Malik Mustafa, Isaac Guerrero, Jacob Cowing, Jarrett Kingston, and Tatum Bethune on day 3. I had my best value for them was Dominique Pooney. He was 74 on the consensus big board. He went 64 overall. My worst value was cornerback Renardo Green. He was outside the top 100 on the consensus big board, and he went 64 overall. What were your best and worst values for them?
Copy paste, right with what Shane just said. But my biggest regret would be not taking a different receiver than Ricky Pearsall. I know CJ Stroud loved the pick, and everyone's like, oh, that means it's a great pick. I don't know what CJ Stroud, I don't know if he knows ball. So I'll say I think could have taken Xavier Legette, Jalen Polk, Roman Wilson, or Troy Franklin. I know it's hard to say Troy Franklin since Franklin went like 70 picks later, but I think all four of Legette, Franklin, Polk, Wilson are better prospects than Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, my biggest regret for them was that they drafted 0 impact players. Now you could say, well, Ricky Pearsall, but Ricky Pearsall is not an impact player unless you trade Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk. You think about the 49ers are not taking Deebo or Ayuk off the field. They're not taking George Kittle off the field. They're not taking Christian McCaffrey off the field. And so unless somebody gets traded, Ricky Pearsall is at best the 5th option. And they also like to keep Kyle Juszczyk on the field. So how is this guy getting on the field? This is a team that's in a Super Bowl window. Contracts are piling up. Brandon Ayuk once traded. Your rookie contract's running out on Brock Purdy. And so this team did not get better this offseason. And you're coming off of a Super Bowl loss, and you need to do that thing. Like the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl, and they got Xavier Worthy, and we'll talk about that next week. But like that's a thing. It's exciting. And the 49ers just didn't do anything exciting that helps push them over the top, I think. So for me, I gave this draft a C-. They had 3 top 100 picks. They took 2 top 100 players for me. I gave it a C-.
I gave it a D. I really didn't like this draft. I like the Pooney pick. Everything else, not good. I don't think you had a single other good pick on the board. I only had 2 top 100 players, and I'm nowhere near. I feel like Pearsall, the draft coverage I'm seeing about Pearsall is so glowing. I'm like, where was this before the 49ers took him?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go to the Los Angeles Rams, who made quite a few pick selections, including their first round pick since Jared Goff in Jared Verse. So they have a Jared preference. They took Braden Fisk in the 2nd round, Blake Corum and Cam Kinchins in the 3rd round. And on day 3, they took Brennan Jackson, Tyler Davis, Joshua Carty, Jordan Whittington, and Bo Limmer. My best value for them was Bo Limmer. 122 on the consensus big board, fell to 217. I think he's a playable center. And so I think that's great value there. I had the worst value was Braden Fisk, who I liked that pick. Right. He's 44 on the consensus big board. They got him at 39. That's fine value, but it cost them pick 52, pick 155, and a 2nd round pick last year. Per Seth Walder, it was the most expensive day 2 overpay of the last 6 drafts.
Wow.
And so they gave up a tremendous amount with the Panthers to move up. And so I think that was a big mistake for them. That's my worst value.
Yeah, I wasn't in the loop enough to know that they gave that much up, because I do like pairing Verse and Fisk back together from Florida State. Like you've seen that they work well together. Like you're obviously recreating an entire defensive line. I like the idea of that. I didn't realize they paid that much. That's crazy. My best value is Jared Verse. I think getting Jared Verse where they got him, he was the last edge rusher off. And then I think there was a big gap between him and I had Trice as my edge rusher 4, who went way later. Braswell, like chopped Robinson, went 2 picks after Verse. I think Verse is just like an immeasurably better player than Chop Robinson. So I love the value that they got with Verse. I think he's an impact guy day 1. I think he's going to be one of the top 20 edge. He's probably better day 1 than Latu or Turner. I actually think at what he's going to be good at. He's going to be able to play against the pass and the run. Really like the Verse pick. My worst value, Blake Corum. You just drafted Kyron Williams. He turned out better than you could ever imagine. And you go back to the well and you take a 3rd round running back. I hate it.
My biggest regret for the Rams was failing to get another wide receiver. Cooper Kupp is entering his age 31 season. He's been under 1,000 yards each of the last 2 years since he had that 1,900-yard Super Bowl season. Yes, you had the Puka Nacua breakout last year, but you just mentioned the 3rd round running back. Would have much rather had a 3rd round receiver. I think wide receiver 3 was infinitely more important, and you didn't do that. But you had 4 top 100 picks, 4 top 100 players for me. I gave this draft a C+.
I had 4 and 4. I gave it a B.
All right. Let's roll on to the Seattle Seahawks, who drafted Byron Murphy II in the 1st round. On day 2, they got Christian Haynes. And then on day 3, they got Tyrese Knight, AJ Barner, Nehemiah Pritchett, Satua Lumua, DJ James, and Michael Jarrell. What were your overall thoughts on the Seahawks? What was your best and worst value?
I'm not as high on Byron Murphy as you guys. Like Jarzon Newton went like 20 picks later. and I had him a slot higher than Murphy. So I think they should have either taken Latu, Turner, reverse, or they should have moved back and got Newton, or maybe moved back and got Robinson. I just don't think taking Murphy up at 16. I wasn't a fan of that pick. And then Christian Haynes, they picked him right around where I had him, so I gave that the best value. None of the other picks really moved me. They got the 2 corners from Auburn. That's fun. But I just nothing really impacts me here. Not moving back is probably my biggest regret. I think this is like a C minus B plus draft. It doesn't get me going.
My best value was DJ James. He was 97 on my board. They got him almost 100 picks later. My worst value was Tyrese Knight, who they overdrafted by about 100 picks. So that kind of washes out. My biggest regret is that they didn't have their second round pick. Now, I know they traded it for a good player from the Giants, but Tyler Nubin went to the Giants with the pick they got from Seattle, and he would have been a great fit in Seattle. So that stinks. I'm not saying I wouldn't have traded for Leonard Williams by any stretch of the imagination, but it really hurts. You regret that you had to do that. Overall, they had 2 top 100 picks, 3 top 100 players for me. I gave this one a B+. So I think this is the one we're the furthest apart on so far.
Yeah, and it makes sense. You're higher on Murphy. You had DJ James. You had him in the top 100. Not a lot that I was excited about.
All right, and to our last team, it is the Arizona Cardinals, who got Marvin Harrison Jr. in the first round, along with Darius Robinson. In the second round, Max Melton. In the third round, Trey Benson, Isaiah Adams, Tip Raymond, and Elijah Jones. And then on day 3, Dadrian Tyler Demerson, Xavier Thomas, Christian Jones, Tajuan Palmer, and Jaden Davis. So they made a plethora of draft selections. I said my best value for them was safety Dadrian Tyler Demerson. He was 80 on my board. He went 104 overall. I liked that guy for them in that range. And my worst value was tight end Tip Raymond, who was 173 on the consensus big board. He went 82 overall with JT Sanders still on the board. I thought that was a big reach.
My best value is Marvin Harrison Jr. Getting to stick at 4, not moving around, not getting cute. I love what they did there with MHJ, and I think most years it wouldn't go QB. Someone would take that top flight receiver. So good for them that they were able to do that. My worst value is just the entire third round, taking a running back when you have James Conner, going double Illinois with Isaiah Adams and Tip Raymond and Elijah Jones. That's 4 guys, none of which I had in the top 100. So they had 7 top 100 picks. I only had 4 top 100 players. I agree with you. I like the Dadrian pick. I will say my biggest regret for them is drafting Darius Robinson. It felt like a half measure. They should have either moved back and gotten one of the Brasweller choices that fell, or they should have moved up when Latu, Turner, Verse, and Newton all fell, or they should have taken Newton. So I just didn't really like the Darius Robinson pick. Shout out Max Melton, though. We both love Max Melton.
Yeah, my biggest regret for them was reaching for everyone after Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, I liked Darius Robinson. I liked Max Melton. I liked Trey Benson. They were all taken about a round too early. Like, I would have much rather, like, you needed a cornerback and an edge rusher. You could have taken Nate Wiggins at the end of the first round, and you could have taken Marshawn Nealand in the second round. And I would have liked that a lot more than Darius Robinson and Max Melton. And that's not to, even mention Trey Benson and who was on the board there, wide receiver wise, particularly, we keep throwing out Troy Franklin, but I would have loved this draft for them if they would have walked out with something like that. I liked the players on day 2, early day 2, the later third round picks I didn't care for, but I just thought they reached for nearly everybody. So they had 7 top 100 picks and they only took 5 top 100 players for me. I gave this one a C-.
I gave it a B-. I do think in a couple of years we're going to look at it and be like, oh, wow, Max Melton's the best slot corner in the NFL. Like, I do think there's a chance that happens.
Yeah, it's very possible. So there you have it. That is our NFC draft grades. If you guys joined along with our live draft coverage, we really appreciate that. Hope you guys enjoyed the streams. We will be back next week to break down AFC draft grades. And then the true craziness of the summer starts. We're going to draft expansion teams. We're going to draft NFL blitz teams, rank head coaches. I don't know. We'll come up with rule proposals. You guys shoot us ideas, DMs on Twitter and stuff. If you've got an idea for a show, let us know. We may do some mailbags, some different things like that. But we get to start being creative a little bit in the off season. That's fun for a little while. And then I start to run out of ideas. So send us some ideas, and maybe your idea will get featured on a show and we'll have some fun with it. But Mark, any final thoughts that you want to throw out before we get out of here?
No, I'm looking forward to doing the AFC. I think there will be an A+, and I think there will be an F.
All right. A little teaser for next week. So thank you guys for joining us for episode 156 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review wherever you stream your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. And we will catch you guys next time.